Well, hello, Sandy.
Amy, hello.
Happy podcast day.
It is that day. I am
It,
happy. And it's podcast day, and it's happy to be podcast day.
it's a happy
We have
podcast day.
a we, for anybody who's watching, we always tape too. I mean, primarily is the podcast, but I always tape so that we can have different videos if we want them. We have a very gray tone going on here, Amy.
Oh, we do. Look at us.
Gray background, other than I got a little yellow popping in the back, but I'm not feeling gray. I'm feeling not
I
gray.
I will tell you why I'm wearing gray today. I am not feeling gray, but I'm getting ready to travel to
Hmm.
somewhere warm. And so this was one of those shirts I am not taking with me because it's a cold turtleneck and it's kind of
Oh,
cool today and it's gray. And I was like, all right, I don't need to wash this and pack it. So I'll wear it today. So that's my reasoning.
I totally get it.
Yeah. All right. So today we are having a little fun today because I have been doing a lot of networking here in Kansas City. And one of the things you said to me is, that's a lot of coffee. And
Is it a
so,
lot of coffee, Amy?
and I am telling you, yes, what happened. So, we're talking today about the people you meet, how you meet people, just, yeah, about making friends, the whole thing. It is a whole new experience for me because I've always had my children to introduce me.
Right.
Okay. And I lived in Omaha for 24 years, and my children had introduced me or brought me into communities, whatever it was, that I had all these very established friendships. And so making a new friend was kind of not very often, because I had
Right.
other
And
friends.
the networking side, and I know, and again, I don't remember if we talked about this in the podcast, but you and I talked about this, maybe sidebar. Almost everything came from referrals, which both of us could relate to.
Yes.
So we were introduction, but it was a soft introduction because it was a friend of a friend. It was a colleague. And so a referral introduction is quite a bit different than a cold open because and many times we're told a lot, it's a email introduction, here's about this person, maybe it's a sidebar conversation, but you already go into it warm, right? You've
Right.
had a lot of cold openings.
I've had a lot of cold openings. And it's been interesting because also redefining what I'm doing in
Mhm.
with this move. So I'm also like, all right, what am I doing? And so, all right, I'll just tell you what one of the things, how this all came about was I joined a networking group in December. I went to the first meeting in January, and at that meeting, we went around, did introductions, and I kind of shared what I did. And one of the things I mentioned was time management strategies. So the program director asked me, okay, in March, can you be on the panel with a few other people? She
Okay.
had, and we're talking time management for business owners. I was like, yeah, well, thank you. Like my very first meeting, and boom,
Okay.
I'm on the panel.
Yeah.
Okay, very nice. So then that was March 14th, which was what, 2 weeks ago? Yeah, it'll be
Yeah.
2 weeks tomorrow.
Yep.
So our date on this, we're recording super early. So you're gonna be like, March 14th.
Words. Yeah. Oh, you gave it away, Amy.
Sorry. I know, I just realized. Okay. Well,
You heard
anyway,
her say she's traveling, so we get a
I
bye.
know. Yeah, give us some grace. Um, so I did that panel on March 14th, and I had at least 15 people reach out to me wanting to connect and meet for coffee or
How
lunch,
many, Amy?
at least 15.
Okay.
Okay, prior to getting on this call, I have actually met with 10 people. I counted them, and I know I've got some scheduled for when I come back home because schedules just didn't align. So, okay, so that happened pretty much all last week. I had those 10
A lot of
coffee
coffee.
dates. It's a lot of coffee.
Well, it's better than alcohol. You would have been a functioning alcoholic. Well, I don't know if you'd have been functioning.
One of them was a happy hour. So I
Okay,
do confess drinking. One of 'em.
that's all right.
Okay. So anyway, it's been an adventure. It's been fun getting to know new people. It's been fun connecting with people and identifying people you want to keep meeting with,
Mhm.
and also identifying the people that maybe not, maybe not, still trying to figure it out. Also, another, okay, so that's my networking story. So
Can
I've
I
been
ask you a
drinking a lot of
question on the
coffee.
networking?
Yeah, yeah.
So how do you handle the ones that you identify as not really a good reason to meet again? Nothing bad, but maybe there's not any commonality. I have a hard time with that. I am the queen of
Yeah.
trying to set the next time. And how do you tactfully, do you just say thanks? I mean, because I'm sure there's somebody of those 10, there were some that there wasn't a good reason to reconnect again. Is that true or not true?
There were a couple that I'm questioning if I'll reconnect with them. And one of them mentioned to me, one of them that I was like, I don't know if this will be a good connection. Like um, for a minute, I'm not going to go into all the reasons, but
But it
anyway,
happens. It doesn't mean they're a bad person. It doesn't mean you
no,
can't have 10,
no,
you can't continue 10 more relationships with coffee. So you got to pare it down.
exactly. And I am somebody who likes deeper relationships instead of just surface level. And
Mhm.
so it takes a lot to maintain those deeper friendships and
Mhm.
develop those deeper friendships. Okay. So this was a person that I would probably not go very deep with. That's what I was thinking. But she did mention reading a book that I found very interesting. And she mentioned bringing together some other people into a conversation.
Okay.
And so I might do that just to see, if it works out or not.
Mhm.
If not, I will probably just say, you know what, I will have to get together another time, but I'll probably delay it, is probably what I'll do. I will not just say, sorry, I don't think it's worth meeting with you anymore. I'm not going to do that. But there will probably be a little bit of create some distance.
But I think a good thing to do, and this is a reminder for myself, and I try to be better at this. You don't have to set the next meeting unless you absolutely have, like, oh, wow, we're going to do this together. We need to set the next meeting. You can leave it and say thank you, and we'll be in touch, because you might link up in LinkedIn or run into each other at an event, but there doesn't have to be a commitment to a second by just committing to the first.
No, oh gosh, no. I don't think there's only 3 or 4 that I committed to a second.
Okay.
And they're often a distance. So they're not right away. And some of them are actually attending events together. And so, yeah, I didn't commit to, I was careful not to. Now, I will tell you, I went into one of the meetings with somebody who had hosted an event,
Mhm.
and the event was to join a networking group. And she's like trying to start up this networking group, and it's kind of pricey. And then there's levels to it. Anyway, I was not interested. I wasn't interested in that. It would just seem like a little bit, it just wasn't a good fit for me. So I met with this person and had coffee, and I had very low expectations
Mhm.
of being with her because I really thought she was going to try to sell me a whole, the alignment, her whole menu of services.
Mhm.
And we met on Friday afternoon, and it was lovely. She was lovely. She didn't try to sell me anything. She made some key introductions for me, and I really appreciated that. Like, I just really appreciated it. And it taught me, again, I know we've talked about this, about going in and not having expectations and being very careful about that.
But I think that's a great point, because I'll tell you, I was the queen of networking, back when I was in Omaha. And I say that because it was something I was really good at, but I didn't ever have expectations. I really didn't. I saw every introduction as, a means to meet somebody, and maybe it would be a friendship. Maybe I'd learn something new about their background, and maybe it'd be a referral one way or the other. And I'll tell you, the relationships that didn't last were those that kept count. Well, I sent you this many people. How many are you going to send me? I would never think that way. I never think that way when I referred to someone. So somebody who had an expectation of what they were going to get in return, being sold something, because to me, that's an expectation too. And if it came up naturally in a conversation, but also followed up with, the don't feel any commitment. But it was really those that the expectation was to meet each other, learn about each other. And if there were ways to collaborate, even if it was in sharing a story, an experience, something that worked, that didn't work, that's all I ever looked for. And I guess it made it more enjoyable for me, and it made the relationships very authentic, and they knew they could call on me and I could call on them, even if it was a question about something that was in my specialty or about someone they were referred to and had I worked with them before, but there was no expectations from each other.
And so, Sandy, I think you just spurred a light bulb moment for me,
Oh,
because I know it's like ding, ding, ding. I think that's one of the reasons I've enjoyed this networking so much, is because I am new to Kansas City.
mhm,
I cannot connect anybody with anybody.
right.
I mean, and they all know that. So I think going into it, they have very little expectations of
What to
me.
get back, right?
They're not going into it to get something back. And so maybe that's one of the reasons I'm enjoying the networking so much, because there hasn't been like this, it hasn't been transactional at all.
Right. And that's interesting for me being new here in Durango, is I have figured out, at first, giving people the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they, don't want something from me, but my bullshit meter was up a little bit. But I had a couple instances where people befriended me. And then when they figured out they weren't going to get a lot from me, meaning I wasn't going to be the new business in town that was going to advertise with them, the
Yeah.
their enthusiasm for me was waned a bit. And I'm like, oh, I'm just, they don't see a dollar sign over my head because I'm not doing what I did back in Omaha. I'm not putting up a shingle and a business here. I'm really more internet and, nationally based. And, that's tough at first, because you do have to realize that you are a bit of a commodity, and the nature of the introduction was to get something out of it. But then it's also a relief, because those aren't the kinds of relationships I want to spend time on, right? A
Right.
transactional type relationship.
Right.
And it does make you
Yeah.
wonder, back in the day when we were able to give back, I'm sure some of those relationships were a little bit more transactional than we thought, because there were referrals that went back and forth, but the ones that I I think I invested most in were the ones where we knew we could at least tap into the other for advice at a minimum. And we would get, we would get some fair comments back, we'd get a response, right? And where it went from there was where it went from there.
Right. Yes. Yes. It's an interesting experience. And I will tell you, I've determined that, one day I did 3 coffees.
In one day. And did you,
One
were you well caffeinated by the end?
I was well caffeinated by the end. By like 3 p.m., my eyes were crossing, and I was like, all right, so now I know my limit on coffee. um, but meeting people outside from networking, because networking feels very professional.
Mhm.
And then there are some people that I've met networking that I've actually yet to meet them a second time. I've met them at an event, and I reached out to them because personally, I emailed both of them, and I was like, I just enjoyed listening to you, and I don't know if I can be a professional connection for you, but I would really like to get to know you personally. And 2 women in particular just really like stuck out, and both of them, I'm meeting them in May. But that was a hard email to try to figure out how to word it, because they are professional women, and I did meet them in a professional setting, and I was just a little like, I don't know if we're a connection professionally, but because one is like, well, you might like her. She's a financial recruiter.
Okay.
She's more kind of up your old alley, I would say.
Yep.
But and I was like, yeah, I'm not going to be much help to you. I don't know if you'll be much help to me, but anyway, she's lovely. And then there's another one that she's, oh my gosh, she is also a CPA. I'm just sitting here realizing I must be drawn to people who like numbers.
Must be.
Anyway, she does something different, but she owns a farm outside the city. And she's like, and she started sharing that when we had the conversation. I was like, she just lit up. And I was like, I love when I get to hear people share what they're really passionate about.
Right.
You could tell that this was her job, but this was her passion. And this is what it was fascinating.
That's awesome. And the
Yeah.
personal side, outside of networking, making the personal relationships, the thing that I found most interesting, and I can't wait to hear if you've had the similar feeling, now that the kids are out of the picture and we're meeting people on our own, I find that I'm looking at relationships as more of a package deal of couples that we can do things with, or I'm taking my husband into the loop quite a bit too. Doesn't mean I'm not also looking for individual friendships, but I'm as much looking for couples to do things with as I am individual friendships. And that's a whole different way to explore new people that you meet, because it was more of an afterthought before, like, oh, maybe we should get the husbands together, or it naturally happened because you'd be at events. But it's been a different type of matchmaking for friends, I would say. Do you have a similar experience with that?
Well, we're just starting that.
Okay.
So there's one lady I met with last week, and she was talking about her husband. And I was like, oh, and I was like, a bit of, I wonder if we should all get together. So we were talking about all getting together because our husbands have similar interest. And so I was like, maybe they'll be, they'll want to hang out, but we haven't actually done it yet. So that's going to be an interesting, how did you navigate? Like, how did you identify couples? Because that's hard.
Well, I think it's easier here, Amy, and here's why. because people like to do things outdoors. So it's like, oh, your husband skis, right? Oh, so you think about small talk. Oh, what did you do this last weekend? Oh, we went hiking. We did that big hike. Oh, we've been to that one before. We're going to Mesa. So all this outdoor activity, you can quickly find out who bikes, who road bikes, who mountain bikes, who hikes, who cross country skis. And that's kind of a big factor. Do they have dogs, right? You can do something with the dogs. And so usually that will bring up, oh my gosh, my husband loves to ski. Oh yeah, mine's an expert skier. Well, I like to be laid back. It's usually those conversations that are a natural link to, hey, if you guys want to go on a hike, take the dogs up on a hike, we should do that someday. Not initially the first conversation, because you just never know. But it is interesting. I have done a couple where we've said, hey, maybe we went out for coffee or a drink. And then I'd say, we should get our husbands together. Because something came up, some commonality, right? Or maybe next time we should bring our husbands together and try out this new restaurant. So things like that, trying out a restaurant, usually the second, if we're going to get back together, or say a happy hour. And after I hear that, obviously they do a lot of things with their husband, right? And we talk about things that we do as couples. Whereas if you think of the conversations way back when, it's how old are your kids? Where do they go to school? What do they do for sports? It's all about what your kids do. That's a whole new world for me too. Nobody gives a shit about my kids. I don't mean that bad, but they don't like almost never. Maybe they'll say, do you have kids? They ask about dogs. We look at each other's dog pictures, but nobody asks me about my kids. I mean, it just doesn't come up.
That's hilarious. So you're bringing to mind, I met someone this weekend because I volunteered for the tournament here in Kansas City. And I went down there and we were waiting. We had like about 15 minutes to stand and wait. And another lady showed up about the same time, about the same age as me. And we're standing there and we started talking. And it was so bizarre, Sandy. We've had like parallel lives.
No way.
We have just been missing each other by this much. Okay. We went to high school together. I went to high school for only 1 year up here, and she was at the same high school, a year younger. Okay. Then we both went off to college. We both came back to Kansas City after college, and we lived like just streets away from each other.
Wow.
Up north in North Kansas City. All right. Then we both moved away. We went to Omaha. She went to Chicago. She just came back about a year ago. And then we came back. I'm just like, we were sitting there talking. I was like, this is kind of bizarre.
It's called
And so
serendipity.
I know. So we were laughing. And then, of course, we now have each other's cell phone number and we're planning something. But children never came up. Like we didn't talk about children. We talked about our mothers. just because I'm going to visit my mom.
Right.
And so I think that's why it came up. And then she was talking about her mom and but we never talked about our children.
And isn't it funny? Like, who would have thought the day that was part of my identity? It's just like they're this, and this. They go to boop, boop,
Right.
boop, and I shouldn't say people don't give a shit, but what they're asking about is when we're trying to get to know each other, we're now identifying as ourselves and not so much as our children or our careers. I find myself saying, here's what I did in my past life. Here's what I do now. And then Garrett usually interjects and says, and she plays around a lot too, or she works part-time for her mother, because I'm always having with her. That's the other line. And so we actually probably talk about parents and then going back to childhood, it's interesting.
When you think about it, we're sharing what we spend our time on now.
Right.
And we don't, and back 10, 15 years ago, we were only spending our time on our children. And I shouldn't say only, but most of our free time, was the focal point was the children and what what was going on with them that you had to go and do.
I think I've mentioned this before, but there's a lot of people here who never had kids. And I think that's one of the reasons they can relocate. A lot of people don't want to relocate because they want to stay where their kids are. But anyway, it's a higher percentage of people we run into that don't have kids. And I think back, it's like, oh my gosh, how annoying was the conversations when they were in their 30s and everybody talked about their kids. Just flip it the other way, because I would tell you that's the first thing somebody would ask you. Do you have kids? Do you have kids? Do you have kids? Or they'd have to listen if you were in a group. But then like now people don't ask. And I've lived in a place where most people's kids don't live here. Yeah. Interesting.
You know what, you make a really good point of what are the things that you're asking that are conversation starters? And I don't ask people about their kids right now because that's not the top of my mind. One of the ladies I met with, she asked me if I liked water sports. That was one of her questions. And I was like, all right, so define water sports. I was like, I don't know where she's going with this. So anyway,
That's an interesting one. Like here, they'd say skiing would be, do you hike? Do you bike? Do you ski? Would probably be the three top ones. I usually say, are you from here? How long have you lived in Durango? That's probably my conversation starter, because then, I love to hear where people are from. I mean, we could talk forever about where they're from. They lived in different places. How did they pick Durango? That you lived here forever? How have things changed? I mean, you can, the whole coffee's gone with the conversation starter of whether they're from here or not.
You know what? That's the question I ask everybody. I was like, I'm always, how long have you lived in Kansas City? And
What
it's
brought you
either,
here?
yeah, it's just you get the whole rundown of life story or
Because everyone
whatever.
has a story, and then they can define their story. All the pieces,
Right.
whether it's parents, school, career, kids, then usually they're defining, and it's really, they're giving their story. So they're sharing the part of it that matters the most to them without asking, oh, do you have kids? Going boom, 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 boom down the line.
Yeah.
So I know we're running out of time, but quick question.
Yeah.
Have you run into the circumstance when you either thought you had a new friend or networking and you didn't hear back from them? When you thought there was going to be next steps, or you developed a relationship, have you been dumped yet?
I have not, but we only went for coffees last week.
Because it probably will happen, because just like we're talking about, and it's hard not to take it personally, because we're so used to, back to the relationship with our kids, our career. That's usually the ones you would keep seeing those people. So no matter what, unless there was some severing of ties, but when somebody goes, let's just say they ghost you, right? Rather than say getting dumped, you don't hear much back, or maybe you've offered a couple of times and, oh, that doesn't work, but they don't reciprocate. That's probably, I've had it happen twice. One was with a couple that we did quite a bit with, and then all of a sudden they ghosted us. And
Yeah.
And Garrett's always good about that, because the few times I brought it up, he says, we have, all of us, everybody can be picky, and we just can't take it personally, because maybe they have enough friends, or maybe we can be much more selective. And the best thing, rule of thumb, is not to take it personally. But it's really weird. I'm not used to being ghosted.
Yeah. It is, yes. And I will tell you, we had friends, a couple that we were friends with that we used to go out with a bit, and then all of a sudden we stopped. And later I learned that they were going through a lot of relationship stuff, and they were not comfortable being with other couples together because they were having trouble being together themselves, which was when I became aware of that, I was like, oh, so it wasn't us. And I felt kind of bad. I was like, I was taking it a little personally. And then I felt bad that they were going through that without any support. Also, that was the other piece of not knowing why they were disconnecting.
Would you have ever
But
Would you have ever guessed, and were you trying to figure out why?
yeah, like I distinctly remember, I'm like, well, I feel like they're not hanging out with us anymore. Cause it was kind of a group of us and they just kind of stopped hanging out with us. And so, um, yeah, I just figured they were hanging out with other people they liked better.
That's
That's what
the
I
thing.
thought. And I was just like,
Every once
so,
in a while come up because this is a bit of a small town. I'm like, oh, we ran into these people. I saw you were friends with them. I'm thinking, well, I guess not anymore. But and then I try to think, did I say something? Did we do something? And then I'll tell myself, well, if their skin is that thin, what could I, I don't think I say anything. But then it's Garrett's comment saying, you'll never know. You have absolutely no idea what's going on in their life. Don't even try to project. And who knows, maybe sometime it will pick up again. But it is hard not to take things personally. And it's really hard not to try to solve the mystery in your mind. And highly likely, whatever it is, you probably never know.
because we want to be liked. Like it's like a basic, like we want to be able to pick who we want to hang out with,
I
but we
know, I
want
want to
every
tell them, come on, I got a waiting list here. What the heck? Don't you know Amy has 15 copies? You are lucky. Just kidding. Just kidding.
Well,
JK.
next month I will be dumped a few times, I'm sure.
We'll use ghosted. It's the new cool word. They just didn't respond.
I'll get ghosted. All right, so let's talk about the real and the ideal in this. The real, I would say there's always opportunity to make new friends
Mhm.
and to seek them out. And, we talk about this a lot in our podcast because I was just listening to us talking when I was doing the editing. And we talk a lot about getting out of our comfort zone and trying different things, meeting new people. We've had several conversations about that. And this is one of those times when I'm going to say that again, get outside of your comfort zone. And
Right.
even if you've been living in the same place for many years, try something different, meet someone new, because there's lots of really interesting people out there, lots of really smart people out there. And it's kind of fun to hear their stories.
Right. It's fun to go new. And the real is there's other people looking for new connections too.
Oh, totally.
Makes
Oh,
them
yeah. My friend from Saturday that I went to high school with, like, she is so excited. I was like, wow, and she's been here for a bit. So she was like, I'm like,
Yay.
oh my gosh, I'm excited to have a new friend too.
Hey.
It was fun. All right. Well, thank you, Sandy.
Do we need to do we hit the ideal too? Are we good?
You're
Or do we
right.
start
We
with the
did.
real?
Okay, let's do. Okay,
We
so
got, come
what's
on,
that?
we're cup is half full, The ideal is, would the ideal be that you're open-minded to the other relationship and you know that it's a two-way street, that you both need to learn about each other and see what happens, right? The ideal is just because you make an initial connection doesn't mean it's forever, but in the same, don't have expectations of what exactly you want back, but to open up the conversation, open-minded and open-hearted, and see where you go.
Yeah, yeah, good one. And I would add to the real, and you kind of alluded to this a little, as we're not all good connections. And so we can let things go
And we
if
can
it's
only
not a
have
good
so many connections. We can only manage so many relationships too. There is a real to that. Even though I don't always think that way, I get it more now.
There is a real to it. All right. Thank you, Sandy.
All
Talk to
right,
you later.
Amy, until next week. Bye.